All right. All right. Well, good morning. And so today we're going to do a rather short, a shorter Dharma talk than some of our longer ones. Today is November 11th. It's Armistice Day, Veterans Day in the United States. This is the day that the truce went into effect for World War I. And so I want to be chanting Odaimoku when it gets to be 11 o'clock all the way through after 11:11, the moment that the ceasefire went into effect. And so last week in our conversation about nonviolent communication, and Trey shared some wonderful experiences this past week, and maybe in a little bit you can recap your DDay experience. Just as a review, last week I encouraged everyone to pick a day and make it a DDay, and on that DDay to listen for statements of diagnosis, denial, demand, and deserve. And we'll continue that practice. Pick another day this week and make it your DDay. And last week, the word of the week was contribution. Can you see that? Contribution. And this week, I didn't write it down, but this week, let's think about connection. How can we connect? And so take a pen and write that down on a Post-it note or something, and take contribution off your bathroom mirror if that's where it is, and put connection on your bathroom mirror. So, you know, there are many ways of connecting with people. And there's a physical connection that we can make by being in someone's presence. There's also a silent connection, and Trey and I were talking about that earlier, about just witnessing, just listening. Sometimes, you know, we think of connection as, oh, I've got to be talking to somebody, but just listening is very connecting. Listening with compassion, with empathy, and with a willingness to allow the other person, as Trey so wisely said earlier, you allow the other person to come to their own conclusions. So let me back up here, and we'll go to Trey. Do you want to share your DDay experience? I thought that was really good, if you don't mind.
Oh, of course. So the DDay experience was basically, it had to do with a situation in which a dog had escaped from someone's household, and it had met with a unfortunate fate. And during that time, when this first occurred, you know, the words that go along with the diagnosis and denial were the ones that, or the statements were the ones that I heard the most of. And I kept, just trying to observe and stay, value-free about the situation and just listen for the D words. So I saw how diagnosis and deserve tended to go like really, really hand in hand. They were very interlinked. Oftentimes in the same statement, you would hear, diagnosis and deserve. Like, I'm trying to think of an example, and it's kind of hard to do on the spot. I wish I had written it down. But demand was the one I saw the least of in this situation. I didn't see a whole lot of that, but I did see definitely a lot of denial. It was someone else's responsibility to watch the dog. I don't think I let it out. I can't have let it out, or it would have been at my feet when I opened the door, this kind of thing. And, of course, things go into the person who is responsible for the dog, deserves to be the one responsible for what happened to the dog, So in this situation, I was able to see all of them quite a bit, with the exception of demand in this particular situation. So that was kind of my DDay experience.
Well, good. Thanks for sharing it again. Because sometimes what we talk about is very personal. Some of it may not be appropriate for mass consumption. I mean, not that we get a mass audience, but it is public. And it'll be on YouTube, well, as long as YouTube exists, you know. It's sometimes best to filter these things before we share them publicly. So I appreciate you sharing that. And so your conclusions were, again, if you don't mind restating, which ones did you hear the most of that day or in that instance?
Definitely diagnosis, denial, and deserve.
Okay. So, and different conversations may elicit different D words. And often, though, I think diagnosis, denial do pop up quite a bit. Demand in political discourse comes up quite a bit. The NRA made a statement about the doctors being a little bit more proactive in the gun control debate. And the NRA's statement was doctors should stay in their own lane. Well, that's a demand. That's a demand. Doctors, I read this one this morning, one tweet response from a doctor says, "Do you know how many bullets I pull out of bodies every week?" And she says, it's not only my lane, it's my effing highway. That's a deserve. I deserve to be able to talk about this because this is this. It's a legitimate thing, but it is a deserve. It is also maybe a counter demand. The NRA certainly practices denial. It's not our responsibility. We're just advocating freedom to purchase guns, and yet they are the ones that have blocked research into the matter, government-sponsored CDC research into gun violence. They're the organization that has adamantly opposed trigger locks at every opportunity. Anyway, those are 4 D words that do come up in various conversations to varying degrees of frequency. And so today there's many things I wanted to talk about. And we will get into we have not covered request yet. We've, lightly we have, just in passing. Mostly we spent observation, feelings, and needs. And we will get to requests next week. So please hold on. And please continue to practice observation. Trey, as you said today, on your D-Day, you were able to observe without without adding value or judgment to any of the things, or sometimes without even commenting on many of the things that you heard that day. And you also shared another experience, and I'll paraphrase it, if you don't mind, that someone came to you for some advice, and you felt that your silence, your lack of giving advice was the most appropriate thing. And you want to share why you felt that way?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is a
you don't have to share the whole experience. Just
no, I know. I was going to say this is just one of those situations where I really felt that the person had kind of just needed somebody to hear them, and that they would come to their own conclusion because I saw it building up. And so I felt that just kind of like restricting and sitting back and letting them come to their conclusion was the best thing I could do for them, and it worked.
Yeah.
The very thing that I had wanted for her, she decided to want for herself before the phone call was even over. So I was very satisfied with that outcome.
So you abstained from diagnosis.
Yeah, I guess I did.
To a degree. I mean, internally you had a diagnosis, but you didn't verbalize it.
Right.
And so, as we're talking about connection being the word for the week, this week, those things are very connecting. And yet we might think that, wow, that's really disconnected. You didn't say anything. You didn't offer any advice. But yet you allowed her the freedom to come to her own conclusion, and you allowed her the freedom of her own self, her own self-empowerment, the freedom of being able to make her own decisions for herself. And in that connection, her trust in you is strengthened by your support, by your presence, by your non-judgmental approach to listening to her. And so, one of the things, so here's an experience many, many, many years ago when I was much younger, but still a leader in the Nichiren Buddhist denomination that I belonged to at the time. Someone came to me that was in an abusive situation. The wife came to me in an abusive situation, and she'd gone to many other leaders about the same problem, and everyone, including myself, told her one thing, and that was leave. And that she should just leave the relationship, that it was the best thing for her, that it was safest for her, and so on. And some years ago, and actually in 2004, when I went back to college at Portland State University for my last attempt at trying to finally graduate from college, I took a course in I forget what the title of the course was, but I took several courses in dealing with family dynamics and spousal abuse and domestic partner abuse and significant other abuse and all the ways that we can classify it. And one of the first lessons that we learned in that class is don't ever tell someone to leave. That is not the best advice. And that, in a way, sort of clashes up against what we would maybe intuit would be the best advice. We might think, well, if they're in an abusive relationship, just leave. Well, there's a dynamic there that a person such as myself, in that when I told this woman that she should just leave, there's a dynamic there that I didn't understand. And that was, maybe she can't. And the reasons why she might not be able to leave are multitude. One of the things that domestic abusers do is they take away your friends. And then when your friends tell you to leave and you can't, then all of a sudden that creates a dynamic between them and their friends of, I'm letting my friend down. They expect I should leave and I can't, and they don't understand. And so I'm failing them by not living up to their expectations. It's a really twisted dynamic. And what the person needs most is friends. And the abuser tries to alienate and sometimes even forcibly disconnects the abused from their friends. And when a friend tells them to do something that they can't do, are you chewing something you're not supposed to? Yes, you are. Don't chew that. You know better than that. When a friend tells them to leave and they can't, then they have failed in their friendship. Not the friend who told them to leave. In a way, yes, that's the case, but the abused person feels like they have let their friend down, that they have not lived up to their friend's expectation. And so they're ashamed. Many people become ashamed of going to that friend again. How can I go to that friend when I can't do what they want? And so then this becomes another disconnecting element. And connection is so important. Friendship is so important, and non-judgmental friends are the best way to be. It's difficult because we want to diagnose. And when I told that woman to just leave, that was in a way a demand. You know, it doesn't say leave or else I'm not going to be your friend anymore. But sometimes that's what people hear. Leave or I won't be your friend anymore. How can I help you if you're not willing to help yourself? Is another thing that is often heard. And so the best way to be with a person who is in a domestic abusive situation is to be their friend, to be their non-judgmental, supportive friend. I'm here for you. I support you. I believe in you. I will do what I can to help you. All you need to do is ask what you want. Sometimes that's all they can do is just be your friend. You know, there are many things that abusers do to control the abused. Money, friends, contacts, freedom to leave the house, controlling schedules, all kinds of things. Leaving is not always possible. Where does someone go? You know, at the hospital we had brochures, and I won't say what they look like because I don't know who's listening. But at the hospital we had brochures that were nondescript, definitely geared to women, women's health issues. And on the inside, it was about domestic abuse support. Because the abuser looks at everything. The abuser examines every move the abused takes. And so when a woman picks up an innocuous looking brochure, it is hoped that somehow that will be a little lighthouse to the person being abused. It's a difficult situation. It's a complex situation. As I mentioned it prior to the recording of this conversation, that that there's also the triangulation issue, the unhealthy triangle, where the abused and the abuser gang up on the rescuer. And so all of a sudden the rescuer becomes a persecutor. So it's a very complex situation. And the best advice is to just let someone know that you'll be their friend, you'll listen, and you'll do what you can to the best of your ability, whatever can be done. Don't tell them what they should do. So sometimes connecting as you did with your friend who asked for advice, you let them hear their own advice. Very connecting. And we don't often think about that. Sometimes just saying, I hear you. And as I said at the beginning of the conversation, off the record, that one of the things chaplains do, and this is, one of the things that's been, I guess, an important part of my life, is just witness. I mean, all the young boys who died from AIDS, their life, for many people, doesn't exist, never happened. And yet I was there. I witnessed their lives. And so, yes, they did exist. They did happen. They did things. They were people. They were real. The disease killed them. I could become really angry and say society killed them. The disease killed them. And they were real people. They had lives. They had stories. And so even in the emergency department, the emergency room, in the hospital we call it the ED, emergency department, because it's all kinds of things. On television, I think they frequently refer to it as the ER. And there's like about 10 ERs in the ED. But anyway, so in the ED, and I'll use the language I'm used to using, in the ED, whenever there's a trauma code 1, so you'll see in various communities, there's a level 1 trauma hospital. There can only be one well, I won't say there can only be, but in most cities, there's only one. There may be a rule there can only be, I don't know. But there's usually at least one hospital designated as a Trauma 1 hospital. This is the hospital that all major incidents, accidents, deaths, whatever, are brought to. And from there, they may be distributed to other hospitals that are not designated Trauma 1. But this eliminates confusion among first responders. And so all the ambulances, all the fire trucks, all the police know there's only one Trauma 1 hospital. Well, the hospital I worked at was a level 1 trauma hospital. And so we we got them all the bad stuff. And whenever a trauma level 1 trauma case comes in, whether it be an adult, we get ATC 1, ATC Adult Trauma Code 1, Adult Trauma Code 2, Adult Trauma Code 3. Well, the 1, 2, and 3 are the degrees of severity, and chaplains always respond to level 1, so ATC 1. It might be a PTC 1, Pediatric Trauma Code. It could be, you know, and then they'll tell us whether it's coming by air or ground. And so we know how long, you know, we have to get to the ED. And so for all level 1 trauma codes, chaplain is present, and everybody is present for level 1 trauma. I mean, every discipline in the hospital, you know, X-ray, everybody, you know, it is there. And so, you know, check in, I tell the recorder, there's a, you know, a recorder there who writes down everything. That's all he does, is he just writes down everything people yell out and say, all the readings, you know, everything. And so, you know, I walk up, I show my badge, I say, you know, Chaplain Jeffus, you know, and then I'd stand off to the side because I can't contribute anything to the medical stuff, but I'm present, I'm witnessing what's going on. I'm witnessing the patient. I'm witnessing the acts of the medical providers who are providing care to the patient, whether they're successful or not. And I've only glimpsed occasions on TV, and on TV it's all frantic. I can tell you that's not the case in reality. In reality, it's very controlled, very calm. I mean, there might be a lot of stuff going on inside, but it's very orderly. There's no yelling and, you know, cross conversations. One person talks at a time, and one person is designated to give certain readings and so on and so forth. And so in one instance, I was present for an ATC 1. Man had been brought in. He was struck by he was a pedestrian struck by a motor vehicle. And the trauma team was doing their things to try to revive him, you know, including chest compressions. And nobody uses paddles. I don't know if they still use paddles on TV or not, but it's always chest compressions, a very physical and violent activity. You know, someone leaning up, pressing your chest down very rhythmically. And so after a while, they eventually declared the patient, they called his death. So they say they call his death. And usually when the death is called, people disperse and go to the next crisis that's brewing someplace else in the ED. In this instance, though, most of the medical providers hung around and were crying. And that's not the normal behavior. I mean, they may be sad inside that they were not able to resuscitate or revive the patient. And with that sadness, they then move on to the next patient. But in this situation, they were crying. And so I walked up and I said, you know, could you tell me what's going on? Why are you all so emotional? Or, you know, why is this patient so important that, you know, you're crying? And I don't know exactly what I said, but in the moment, I mean, when I say it now, it sounds sort of like, what's wrong with you people? Why are you crying? And that wasn't the situation at all. It was, wow, this is really important. They're crying, you know. What can I offer? What ears can I lend? How can I witness their grief, which was extraordinary from what they normally experience, you know, demonstrate? And so they shared with me that this was a guy named Chilly Willy, and it was really moving to me. Chilly Willy, about 10 years before his death, his wife was killed as a pedestrian by a motor vehicle. And when that happened, his life just fell apart. He became homeless, alcoholic, all kinds of, you know, everything. And he had a history. You know, as I say in the medical field, he was a frequent flyer. He would be in the ED every couple of weeks for some reason or another. Alcohol withdrawal, you know, prescription needs, you know, any number of things, malnutrition, sometimes just to get a bed to sleep on. But he would be in there, and they grew quite fond of him. And they'd noticed that, and this was several years he was doing this, so everybody knew him. He was Chilly Willy. He was sort of a local homeless celebrity in a way. Everybody in the city knew Chilly Willy. I did not, but many people did. And he was homeless in a different area of town than the homeless I was aware of, which was the homeless I most interacted with were right downtown. So anyway, he'd started to clean his life up. He'd gotten an apartment, so he wasn't homeless anymore. He'd quit drinking, so his health began to improve. And so they didn't see him quite as often, maybe once every 6 months. And then that night, he was killed by an automobile as he was walking across the street. And it was very sad. And it's actually a moment that I have recorded on my calendar to remind me every year of Chilly Willy's death. One of those things, I didn't know him, but I witnessed. I was a witness to his existence. I was a witness to his story, to his life, or to part of his story, the story shared by others about his life. And turns out we have a mutual friend who was also a good friend of Chilly Willy's, who he himself was homeless with for a period of time. And so this guy, actually we sort of, he's on Instagram and we, you know, share stuff, and he's an artist. And so because I mentioned Chilly Willy on Instagram and did a little memorial drawing for him, we really connected. You know, he said, "You're the only other person I know who you know, felt so strongly about Chilly Willy." And so I explained to him, my connection was just brief, only a minute, but I was moved by that. You know, that story, this person, he was real. He may have been homeless to many people. He may have been just a part of the landscape to many people. And I'm sure he was just part of the landscape to many people who would casually drive by or, without even thinking, ignore him. But he was a real person. He had a life. He had a story. He had an existence. And I, you know, being witness. So being witness to somebody's suffering without judgment, without expectations that they conform to some standard or belief that you have. So as we think about connections for this week, and again, another D word, so you've got connections as your word of the week, you got a D-Day, and one other homework assignment is to write down in a sentence or two at the most, you know, not a big long dissertation, just a sentence or two. Why to you learning nonviolent communication is beneficial, will help you, is a good thing to do? What are your reasons for pursuing this. And for anyone who watches this later, if you have no reasons for doing it, that's okay too. Maybe you might want to say why, write down why you think this is pointless, why you think this is needless, why you think that this is not right for you, either in this time or ever. And for those who wish to pursue it, write down why it's important to you. What are your motivations for doing this? And we'll leave that out there for next week. Trey, got about 4 minutes. I want to start right at 11 or shortly after 11 so that we can be chanting at 11:11.
All right.
Any comments?
Uh,
Put you on the spot.
no, not on the spot. I just don't think I really have a whole lot of comments. I definitely have. I have these assignments that I was trying to write down, or not assignment, you know what I mean? Like I was trying to make sure I had everything written down, so I was distracted with the writing. But no, I was actually kind of moved by your Chili Willy story. That actually, I know I don't. It sounds like the kind of thing that's like a really moving book almost, that. But yeah. It is kind of interesting because, like you're saying, this person was known, but only to the people that knew him. And it kind of makes me think about how a lot of lives are like that. And, ours included. There are some people that will never know me and they'll never know of me or when I'm gone or whatever. And it's like, I mean, that's life, but there are people who will. Even people that I may not have known knew me as well as I thought they did, or knew of me.
Yeah, I think about, all the people that I've known who've died. I mean, kids when I was in a motorcycle club, died in motorcycle accidents, and I used to have this feeling that, within a few weeks, most people who knew me, this is what I used to say, most people who knew me will easily forget who I was or who I am. I mean, if something jogs their memory, they might recall me, but I won't be on the surface of their memory. And after 6 months, there'll probably be nobody who, will think of me just, reflectively or reflexively or whatever the word I'm looking for. It won't be on the top of their memory. And then someone wrote to me a couple of weeks ago and said, that's not true. And I got to think, no, it's not. My books, will live long after I'm gone. These recordings, for whatever they're worth, will live on long after I'm gone. And that's a reality that most people don't have. And so part of my voice, when I first began writing, I didn't. But as I got into writing more, I realized, this is a way for me to make sure that these stories of these people live way longer than myself or that they would have. While millions of people don't even know they existed, and millions more have forgotten them, there will be some who will know them, even if it's through my story. Just as I knew Chili Willy through the story of the medical providers, I knew of his life through their story of him. And so, part of my writing is about the stories of the people that I have witnessed. So you'll live long as you two. So yeah, this is not an event that I had expected to happen. I did not expect to be remembered long after my death. There's memorials set up for priests, and yeah, big deal. Who reads that? But I thought maybe there'll be one or two that'll miss me when I'm gone. And I don't know. I mean, maybe nobody will miss me when I'm gone. But my name is certainly out there. And if you do a Google search, well, I haven't done one in many years, but when I did one about 6 or 7 years ago, there was like 7 pages, just me. First 7 pages if you search on my name, which You know, I mean, you get down a little bit further and there are other Rushos and other Jeffuses. And so the Google algorithm started changing up. But I was amazed at all the stuff. I mean, like there was an article about me attending an activity in Houston many, many years ago. It was like, whoa, you know, so yeah. It's interesting to do a Google search on your name, what you'll find. So you may live longer than you thought. There's Neil's phone again, driving. Okay, it's 1 after 11, so we're going to start chanting, and we're just going to chant today. And we'll do that through a few minutes after 11 after. And so today, as we're chanting, let us recall the lives of those who were killed in World War I, and on both sides. There are no enemies in death. And think about their future existences. Some of their futures may be happening now. Some of their futures may not have happened yet. And we pray that their future be one of peace and longevity, that they were denied in their life during World War I. And we also pray that somehow, even in the face of all the conflict in our society today, that somehow peace will prevail. There will always be some sort of conflict, I guess, to some degree. We have those conditions present in our lives. This is not to deny that we have anger, we have hell, we have greed, we have hunger. We have all of those things. However, it is possible that we can transform our lives to be guided by enlightenment and Buddhahood. So let us pray with that spirit in mind. And I'm going to end the recording now.